I did want to ask you, Stuart, because a lot of listeners have messaged us in this morning about the two holding midfielders and their job and their role, and sometimes they feel it's a bit negative. Just your feelings on that?
In all honesty, I thought it was watching England play in March. I thought they'd done really, really well in regard to Rice and Phillips working well together. And I thought, you know what, when we get to hopefully the latter stages against the bigger nations, you're going to need a good shield in front of our central defenders. Because cast your mind back 2 games, before we come into this tournament, we're thinking, my goodness, can we defend well enough at the heart of our defence? That was the big question mark, you know. So 2 games down the line, keep that in your mind fresh as well, that we're trying to look after the 2 central defenders that I think have done quite well in the 2 games. So somewhere in the tournament further down the line, I think Rice and Phillips are going to have to play together. During the course of the game yesterday, and whilst I don't like to say it, I would have probably sometime in the second half probably dropped Phillips back to be the more of the holder, and taken Ricey off and maybe put Bellingham on to offer us a little bit more, because I think Bellingham could really have a big impact in this tournament given game time, you know, but he'll have to feed on scraps at the moment, because that's where he is in the pecking order. But that Rice and Phillips one is not an out-and-out stood next to each other like bookends, you know, because Phillips has got so much energy, which he showed certainly in the first game. Didn't catch the eye so much last night, but they play it staggered, you know, with sort of Rice, the deep-lying one, and Phillips and Mount in some ways offering more energy going forward.
Yes, it's not as negative as it looks on paper.
That's what I'm trying to say.
And I would say, I mean, look, you know him far better than me. You've worked with Declan, and I actually feel like he could be an attacking midfielder as well, because he's got great energy and he's quick. Yeah, you know, he can go beyond people.
He's got much more to his game, and we feel as though there's more to his game to come. You're right what you're saying. He's a good finisher, good striker of the ball, can get from box to box. He is playing in a position where England need him and his club need him to play in the position that we're asking him to play a little bit more. I think if there was more of a holding midfield player, and you said to Dec, right, I want you to get in their box. Every time that ball goes out wide, you'd start seeing a player that would get more goals to his game and probably catch the eye a little bit more than what he actually does. But I think England needs someone to sit in front of the 2 central defenders, especially when you play against better opposition.
You touched on it earlier on about the fullback changes that Gareth Southgate made, bringing in Luke Shaw, bringing in Reece James as well, and you were disappointed with their contribution. Can you understand the thinking of why Southgate named them in the side?
I would have done exactly the same. Yeah? I would have changed both fullbacks. I might have slid Trippier. What would you think? I just think to freshen it up. I think there's very little to choose between them. It's on the day and on form. As it goes yesterday, I didn't think the form of the 2 that actually played was particularly good. Now, he left Cole Walker, you know, he rotated the players that didn't get on the bench, and Cole Walker was one of those that didn't get on the bench. I think if he had been on the bench, he might have been tempted to put Cole Walker on at half-time or just after. And Cole's pace going forward would have potentially solved the problem that I talked about, you know. But I think there's very little to choose between the fullbacks, you know, Chilwell and Shaw. If Chilwell plays the next game at left-back, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. You know, there's very little to choose.
Would that be a strange thing to do, though? Because then you'd have played 3 different left-backs in 3 games.
It's very unusual. It's probably not happened before for England. I'll grant you that. But that's just the options that we've got as a team. And I think that's a good thing. You know, whether you played Foden or Rashford or whatever, or Grealish or Sancho, whatever, we got good options around, and it's getting the right formula. I think Gareth is still looking for that formula, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. Do you think he actually knows his first 11? He's still working it out.
I think he'll know the majority of his first 11. I think Maguire potentially might play in the next game, but I've got to say, I think that Mings has done himself no harm in the 2 games that he's played as well. You've also got to throw in the mix. I spoke with David Moyes coming home from the game yesterday, and he threw to me. He thought, I wonder whether England need to switch to a back three and just have a little look at that in this last group game and see whether the dynamics of that change and help Harry Kane and the advanced players a little bit more.
Yeah, it's quite incredible because England have got a luxury of players in all sorts of positions, and we've talked about right backs and the numbers, and you've mentioned left backs if Trippier can go there as well. So it is a juggling act and spinning plates of finding your best 11.
Yeah,
and that's what might be the benefit after the group phase. Get out and go, right, now I know exactly what suits us for the knockout stages.
But isn't it funny in a way? We've been crying out for a squad full of talent, but are we now at a point where we've got too much talent and we don't know what to do? And Gareth Southgate's there thinking, who do I play? What, and everyone's calling out for Jack Grealish should start, and so all these questions that need to be answered.
The players have to solve that, though, Nat. Their form has to solve that. Their form has to send a message out to the manager when he picks. It's like any nation that's at this tournament now. You get in the team, you get picked. Your performances, if they're that good enough, you'll win 2 caps. The one on the night and the one in the next game because you've played that well that they can't leave you out the team, Yeah. Calvin Phillips done it in the first game. He was that good, you had to pick him again, And that's the nature of the game. The players have to solve, on occasion, the dilemmas that Gareth and the coaching staff have got.